Good evening. We are so excited to have you here with us tonight in the nation's capital. Can you give yourselves a hand for being here tonight? We are here, 100 BMe leaders from around the country. Our friends, our champions from near and far are here tonight. I was waving to you. Yes. Pittsburgh, how you doing? Our friends are here from near and far tonight to help us celebrate black men that are doing things to strengthen their community. We are BMe Community. We are a network of black men that build caring and prosperous communities. And so we're here in the nation's capital celebrating these gentlemen who've come from Philadelphia in the house. Make some noise. I am ashamed. I'm from Philadelphia. That was weak. I know we just ate. I said, Philly, make some noise. And we have Detroit in the house. Now, some of y'all ain't from Detroit making that noise. Ain't all these Detroit people in the house. Detroit, are you in the house? And then I need I need some of you to help them out. But Akron is in the house. There we go. And the stepchild. Pittsburgh in the house. And Baltimore in the house. And I need y'all to help us out. Miami in the house. Okay, I got you. But we and I didn't leave anybody else, right? No. DC's in the house. Can y'all help DC out? I said DC is in the house. We thank you so much for joining us tonight from near and far. Tonight you will hear from our BMe leaders who are in Baltimore. And BMe leaders are guys who are honored for what they do and the work that they do in their community, for their authenticity, for their commitment, and they receive a special honor and recognition, and they are welcomed into our network. We have about 144 BMe leaders around the country. 100 of them or so are here with us this weekend, and you'll hear from our BMe leaders in Baltimore. And they stepped up during the unrest and the uprising in Baltimore, and we're going to hear about what they're doing to take Baltimore forward. You'll hear about how they're leading in solutions and prevention. And then right after them, we'll have an address from our chairman, Benjamin Jealous, who will talk about policing in the 21st century, Baltimore and beyond, and we'll talk about how to shift America's outdated narrative on black men and boys. To host this panel is our acting Baltimore manager, Mr. Sean Barnett. Please give him a hand as he comes.
Thank you. As Ben said, I'm glad to be here with the fellow BMe leaders from across the nation. I'm glad to be heading this brief discussion on Baltimore and what happened. As you all know, and as you've all seen in the news, there was an uprising that was provoked by some youngsters in our community, and they let their frustrations out in a less than positive light. If you aren't familiar with Baltimore, Baltimore has, the demographics of Baltimore differ from areas like Ferguson, New York, Charleston, South Carolina, because where pockets of black individuals exist in those neighborhoods, Baltimore is predominantly ethnic, predominantly African American. So as in other cities, unrest could be corralled. In Baltimore, if you have one neighborhood corralled, the very adjacent neighborhood is definitely going through some things and causing a ruckus. So the police were not ready. They were unable to handle what happened, and so you have what played out in the media. I followed the incident from beginning to end. It started at Mondawmin Mall. Mondawmin is the largest cash mall on the East Coast. And that may be due to its location in an urban neighborhood where a lot of what's the word? I'm sorry? No, just behaviors and things that are not looked upon as positive go on. So what happened was a lot of the youth After the Freddie Gray, it was the day of the Freddie Gray funeral, they said we're gonna mob the mall and we're going to take over Mondawmin. If you don't know about Mondawmin, if you're under 18, you are not allowed to enter the mall on any school day prior to 5 p.m. So Mondawmin already has a police presence Monday through Friday out of the week. So having additional police was something that only provoked the situation because the police presence is already there and youth are not allowed in the mall whatsoever unless they're with a parent or guardian over the age of 18. When you get there, they shut down the transportation system, and Baltimore has a citywide high school program. So you have youth from East Baltimore, South Baltimore, other areas of Baltimore in one area that cannot get home. And you have police who are in riot gear facing them, and you have youth who feel like, okay, they're testing me, I'm gonna give them something to test and I'm gonna push back. So that's what happened. I saw the beginning, the first initial arrest of a youth, and I saw the last fire that was set in East Baltimore. What was depicted on the media, while some of the things went on, it was not as bad as some people would make it out to be, and it was corralled a lot sooner than other places. We have with us a panel of individuals who are BMe leaders from Baltimore who are on the ground and continue to do work after the uprising. They are in positions in which they have influence in their communities, and they are using that influence to make Baltimore a better place for our youth and young adults. With us today, we have Damian Cooper. He is the director of the Office of Neighborhood Relations with the City Council. We have Rodney Foxworth, who is the founder and CEO of Invested Impact. We have Adam Jackson, who is a founder of Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. We have Lance Lucas, who is the chairman of the Greater Baltimore Black Chamber of Commerce. If you could give these fellas a hand of applause as they come to the stage. We have Mr. Damian Cooper. He is bridging the divide between police and youth by partnering youth with incoming police cadets. We have Rodney Foxworth, who is cultivating resources for entrepreneurs in disenfranchised communities. We have Adam Jackson, who is advocating for public policy reform as it relates to police accountability. And we have Lance Lucas, who is cultivating relationships between corporate America and disenfranchised communities through technology, education, and training. Could you give them a hand of applause once again, and we'll go into what they do. Mr. Cooper.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? All right. So again, my name is Damian Cooper, Director of Neighborhood Relations for the City Council President, Bernard C. Jack Young. In my job capacity, I get to see everything that goes on in the inner workings of the city. We are the legislative branch of Baltimore City. And even though I work in City Hall, I see some real inconsistencies that even bother me. So when I won the BMe Leadership Award last year, I wanted to start a program with young African-American males, middle school boys, those who are on the cusp of falling off the cliff, and also with our Baltimore City Police Department. Because for some reason, a lot of people believe that black youth and the police officers cannot get along. So what I wanted to do was start a program to shift that paradigm. There's a school in Baltimore City called Cross Country Elementary and Middle School that resides about 1 mile away from the Baltimore City Police Academy, where we train our incoming officers, and we also do existing training for our existing officers as well, in-service training. So what I did is I met with Commissioner Batts, his leadership, and asked him, could I utilize the Police Academy? For the past 4 or 5 years, they've told everyone no. And I came at him like this. I said, Commissioner, I said, you guys are constantly fighting this battle of how you're going to start working with these youth. And if you don't let them inside, they'll never, ever understand what you do, and these new officers will never understand what our young boys are and who they can be. See, in Baltimore, a lot of our police officers don't live in the city. They live in New York. Some live in New York. They live in Delaware. They live in D.C. They live in outskirts of Virginia. But we have a very small pocket that lives in the city. So how can our officers know our young men if they don't live there? How can they know our young men if they're not constantly around them even before they get that badge? So to them, they see what they see on the street, but they don't understand that some of these young boys are truly hurting on the inside. And how will our young men understand who our officers are? Because the only thing they see on TV is somebody getting locked up, somebody getting hurt, somebody getting killed by a police officer. So there's no trust. I've been a Baltimore City resident all my life, And one thing I learned about Baltimore City is that we're a very, very untrusting city and an unforgiving city. And when something happens, it stays with us through generation after generation. So after I told Commissioner Batts, he understood where I was coming from. So it allowed me to bring these young men into the police academy. And from there, a lot of eyes began to open, because the young men began to see that all police officers weren't bad, and all officers began to see that all of our young men were just some little boys on the street looking to do wrong. A lot of them are looking for direction, they're looking for love. The thing is this, let me ask you guys this. How many of you in here have ever done something in your life, the moment you did it, you wish you didn't do it? Impulse actions, correct? Even to this day, I don't care how old you are, we all have impulse actions. I've been married for 14 years, and there's still times I say something to my wife, and the moment I say it, I know I'm jammed up. Let's just be real. But our young men are at that cusp right now where they don't know what to do. Everything is impulse. Because right now they're in a technology-based society, wherever they see, they think they can emulate. So my job, what I did, I started a program called Project Pneuma. Pneuma means wind breath, breath of life. And our tagline is breathing new life. Because a lot of our young men don't believe that there's any kind of life in Baltimore City. A lot of them don't see a way out of no way. And so what I've done is that we've gotten together with these police officers, and we begin to become partners. The cadets come out every single Tuesday and Thursday with these young men, and they work with them. They go to their homes. They see where they live, and they begin to understand what's going on in the inner city. And even if they've graduated, they've come back to work with these young men. And we've got a consortium of brothers to come out and to work with these young men. Because the thing is, in order to breathe new life, they need to see other men. Because oftentimes they don't see us. And right now I wish we had some of our young men right here today. So they need to see these kind of things. But as far as uprisings, what took place really broke the city. And it broke me because after working 20-hour days and seeing the hurt in our city and how we were constantly put down, it really hurt me to my heart. We called in a group of gang leaders from the Crips and the Bloods to come meet with us behind closed doors. No TV cameras, no news media, nothing. Just to hear what they had to say. And two of these young men were brothers, Eric and Steve Bowman, because they don't mind if I tell their names, were part of the Crips. We sat with them, we talked with them to come to realize that these young men wanted to do more than be in the gang, but they saw no way. One wanted to go to college, and one needed his GED. So we told them this. We told them that if you meet us at Coppin State College the next day, we'll make sure you get in college. I met them there, and they came there. They didn't have their colors on. They weren't dressed the best, but they came there with what they had. And the one brother, Steve, got enrolled in the business program. He brought his transcript up to Coppin, and he's now enrolled in Coppin. His brother, Eric, wrote a book, was designing clothes. But people never saw this. But he didn't have his GED. So we took him over to Joe Jones and the Center for Urban Families. And as of May the 8th, 2015, he's been in his GED program, learning. Our young men want to be better. But if we don't begin talking to them and listening to them, things are never going to change. And I'm going to tell you right now, and if it's being taped, whatever, and my boss sees it and I can get fired, I don't care. We got to do better in City Hall. We have to do better. Because we don't, what took place in April will take place in June, will take place in July, and it will never stop. Until we stand up for our people and stop worrying about votes, nothing will ever get done. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Rodney Foxworth.
So, of course, I have to follow up Damian Cooper. So, my name is Rodney Foxworth. I'm also a lifelong Baltimorean. I'm the founder of a startup organization, Invested Impact, that's really focused on increasing entrepreneurship and wealth creation in what people will describe as distressed communities. I'm also the co-founder of an innovation space that's coming online this fall in Baltimore, the Impact Hub, Baltimore. So Baltimore is not unlike many of the cities, all the BMe cities, Philadelphia, Detroit, Pittsburgh, and Akron. Over the last 40 years, Baltimore has lost something like 95,000 jobs in the cities alone. That's not including the jobs that have been lost in the surrounding counties. So in Sandtown, I grew up in Park Heights, which is not too far from Sandtown. But in Sandtown, you have about 50% joblessness rate among working adults. And you also have real unemployment of about 20%, which is about double the city of Baltimore. But this is not unusual. One of the challenges, though, what makes Baltimore unusual is the fact that we are a city in a region that has an increasing in job opportunities. But people have been excluded in those opportunities. And so one of the biggest challenges for a city like Baltimore is how do we increase opportunity for entrepreneurs that are working already in places like Sandtown, places like Park Heights, traditionally communities that have not had access to capital, to actually increase their enterprises to build wealth in the community for the community. And so that's what we're about at Invested Impact. And so what we're doing right now is raising financial resources, very flexible financial resources that can be given to entrepreneurs that are committed to improving their community. And we have a number of those entrepreneurs in Baltimore and here today. You know, Chris Wilson, I know, is here today, and he can really attest to the difficulties that it is to be a small business owner in Baltimore, trying to do the right thing, trying to pay a living wage, create opportunities for people to move up the career ladder. On top of that, we also want to work with folks like Lance, who you'll hear from later, to ensure that people are included in the innovation economy. Just to give you a perspective on this, just in terms of what even the advocacy community looks like as it relates to tech entrepreneurship and innovation entrepreneurship. I mentioned this to Travian the other day. I sit on the board of an organization that is attracting innovation and tech entrepreneurship in the community. We've got 45 individuals on that board, 3 African Americans, right? So really perpetuating the same things that have been occurring for decades. So we want to make sure we have a shift around that, because there are opportunities when people get connected to them. So we can do one of two things. We can continue to do business as usual, or we can provide opportunities for entrepreneurs on the ground that are really trying to benefit their community. And so we're creating flexible opportunities for people, entrepreneurs, so that really our bottom line is ensuring that we're increasing economic opportunity for folks, that people have opportunity to get good jobs, right? So our concern is about that and how we can drive that using capital in all sorts of ways, whether it's grants, whether it's low interest loans, no interest loans, whatever we can do to increase opportunity for folks in those communities. Because as long as people don't have opportunity, we'll have to continue to see what we've seen over the decades. What was most surprising to me was how surprised people were nationally that these sort of things played out. There was no surprise. People have been depressed for decades economically. And a number of other factors, policing contributing to that. So unless we change that dynamic until we have wealth built into the communities, until we have real equity in those communities, we'll continue to have the same cycle. So that's what we're about. We'd love to partner up with everyone that's in Baltimore and elsewhere to really move that agenda forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Rodney. Adam Jackson.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Adam Jackson, and I'm also from Baltimore, a lifelong Baltimorean. And my perspective is a little bit different because, you know, I run a grassroots think tank here in Baltimore City, and it focuses on the ways that public policy affects the black community in particular in Baltimore. And so I know for me, I mean, I heard Sean's description of the uprising, but I know for me, it was like, you know, the last 4 or 5 weeks have been extremely real for me. because I know before the death of Freddie Gray at the hands of Baltimore City police officers, we were already working on reform in Annapolis, which is the capital of Maryland, working with the state legislature to reform the laws that directly impacted, that had a direct connection to Freddie Gray's death. And so I know I do know for me, I was actually in the street when a lot of the uprisings occurred. And the thing is, people talk about uprisings like when that one day of news coverage, that people saw fires. I was there throughout all of it. And I remember the first day we saw the first day I didn't expect any protests, because in Baltimore I'm used to black people getting killed by police. And so when I saw the news and I saw 1,500 people in Gilmore Homes, which is a housing project in West Baltimore, I was completely blown away. I've never seen anything like that. And so the second day, because I knew I have students, I have friends, I have family who were all trying to go out and be a part of what was going on, I just went out to be supportive and to protect them, So at that second day, it was 2,500 people. And so one of my students, her name's Michaela Gilliam Price, beautiful young lady, brilliant. She got arrested because she tried to jump the barricade because the police blocked us off from even protesting in front of the police district station. So she tried to go over the barricade, they arrested her. And as a black man watching a young black girl that you taught, get arrested by white police officers, it does something to you. So, I tried to jump the barricade with her to make sure that she was safe. The police officers blocked me back. Luckily, the Fruit of Islam, for the Nation of Islam, was there. But there were all types of instances like that throughout the past 5 weeks that I know I've personally gone through and a bunch of other folks have gone through. But I know that the problem is that the national media has been portraying, black folks in Baltimore who are enraged over the death of Freddie Gray as savages, and people aren't talking about the ways that structural issues have led up to the fires that were burning in Baltimore. People were talking about, because, from my perspective, I feel like I've said this a few times to a bunch of different reporters because I just think it's true. People talk about the fires that were burning on Penn North, like the fires that were in the street, the fires in the trash cans, the fires on businesses, but people aren't talking about the fires of racism and white supremacy, the fires of mass incarceration, the fire of poverty, all these different fires that were burning in the black community, in Baltimore in particular. And so it's interesting to me that not everyone wants to talk about well, what are we going to do to fix Baltimore, when somebody like me who has been working on it for several years is like, well, welcome, we were already doing that. So to talk about the specific things that we were doing here in Maryland and particularly Baltimore, there's a law called the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. It was enacted in the 1970s in Maryland. And so what it does is that it gives police a separate set of rules when they commit misconduct. It's particularly useful for them when it comes to deadly force. So a lot of people were talking about how come we didn't hear the verdict on the charges so quickly. And so in Maryland, let's say if I'm a police officer and I kill someone in this room, I have 10 days before I have to give a public statement. Which means that and I also get access to the evidence that is being put against me when you see, in terms of the case of misconduct, which means I have 10 days to corroborate my story with my superior officers and other officers who may have been involved in the issue. And so besides that, in Maryland, you also have 90 days. You only get 90 days to file a complaint against a police officer when you talk about police brutality. And there's all these other issues. And I mean, the most troubling part of that to me is that you also get to file for workers' compensation as a police officer if you kill someone, which means I'm stressed out. I need to file for workers' compensation, even though I'm suspended with pay. And so there's all these things that are part of the Police Officers' Bill of Rights in Maryland that we were trying to reform in the legislative session from January to April. And so zero bills in Maryland passed for police accountability. And so what happened was we called that out as racist, and not as individual people that were racist, but a structure that is inculcated in racism and white supremacy that kept us from talking about transformative change. And people didn't talk about that before Baltimore was hit with these uprisings. People would want to talk about it after the fact and come late to the party. And so from my perspective, that's what people need to be focusing on here in Baltimore. And I think people say we need to get organized. We've been organized. I don't need people to come in and throw, because national organizations were coming in saying we want to give resources. That's excellent. You can give money to the local grassroots organizations doing the work. Because a lot of us know we get overpowered and we get crowded out from the larger national organizations because they have the play, they have the PR. But we often don't get the access to the same capital and resources. And so that's our position in terms of LBS, in terms of what we do in Baltimore. And besides that, there are other black grassroots organizations like us that formed a coalition called Baltimore United for Change. And so all of us are working together cohesively, not in our silos, not to get on TV, not to be in front of the cameras, not to be on newspapers, but to actually be in the grassroots community, be in the community and work with them to make sure that we can get justice for Freddie. And so besides the uprisings in the long term, we're looking for legislative change. The Police Officers' Bill of Rights is one component, but we also have organizations of young people who want to protest, and they can do that as an instrument of it, but that's only one part of a larger strategy to get liberation and justice for black folks that live in Baltimore. So I know for me, the larger issue is how do we figure out ways to deconstruct and destroy racism in this country? And I think one of the ways we can do it is by talking about criminal justice issues, because it affects black people so much. And the last thing I'll say before I sit down, one thing I was talking about recently with folks is that in Maryland, and Baltimore particularly, like, people aren't really, we don't really know what racism is. Because I grew up in a black community. I went to school with black people in the public school system. My parents are black, my teachers are black, the police officers are black, the mayor is black, the city council's black. So no one knows what racism looks like, when you talk about racism in Baltimore. And so the example I always give with, anybody who know who Martin O'Malley is? Yeah, the guy who's running for president, who's announcing tomorrow. Hate that guy. But Martin O'Malley, between 1999 and 2007, he commissioned over 757,000 illegal arrests in Baltimore. And in 2005, he arrested over 100,000 people. And so Baltimore only got 650,000 people. So you got to imagine, you're arresting a sixth of the population in 1 year. And so people don't see the linkages between Martin O'Malley and Freddie Gray. People want to talk about Freddie Gray, but we don't talk about Tyrone West, Monet Turnage, Anthony Anderson, other black people who were killed by police. And so to me, those are always important discussions to have amongst each other in terms of talking about the way structural issues play out in a city like Baltimore, and when you talk about how racism plays into things like policing practices. So that's the work that I'm doing in Baltimore, and I hope other folks can join us in supporting our work. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Lance, if you could close us out.
Yeah. Okay. Try to be concise. So if you got pens and pencils, start writing, okay? My name is Lance Lucas. People's perception of reality is what's real. So I'm gonna take it back and I'm gonna take it forward. I'm gonna be very quick and concise. It is 1832. And my name is William Ellison, born April Ellison. I have 1,000 acres, 40 slaves, and I'm the largest African-American slave owner in the United States of America in South Carolina. From my perspective, everything's fine. In 1967, they conducted a study, and they asked European Americans, was there racism in the United States of America? And overwhelmingly, 70% said they didn't think it was a big issue. The same number hit the same thing in 2014 when they did the same survey. If you look at your Facebook, your Snapchat, your house, your car, you living good, you okay, from your perspective, I ask you, CEA and GEO Group make $2.3 and $3.2 billion off of mass incarceration in the United States of America. They have contracts with state governments for 90% guaranteed filled up prisons and sue the jurisdictions if they do not fill the prisons. They determine by 4th grade reading levels whether or not our children are going to be incarcerated. And in Baltimore, there was a study done by Johns Hopkins that said 97% of people born into poverty in Baltimore die in poverty. That is an effective system of poverty. That is not a mistake. That is not a slip. That is an effective system. I wish my systems were 97%, right? But you look at that neighborhood that had that riot, I taught in that neighborhood for 10 years on Gilmore and Edmondson at Baltimore Talent Development High School. And once a month, 1 year, we had to watch ourselves on TV from SWAT lockdown because there were shootings on the outside of the school. We had to fight the gang members off the students every week to make sure that they could get home on the bus stops every day. So we're living in a state of this war zone, and you look at it, and you look at the past, and you look at, if this is mass incarceration, it seems similar to slavery to me, because in 1852, there are more African-American males incarcerated today than at the height of slavery. Where are our abolitionists? Where are Harriet Tubmans? Where are our Frederick Douglasses? Are you an abolitionist? We got 100 BMe leaders in this room here today. So we say, okay, you told us what the history is. We know where we at, so tell me something different. And I think it's fitting today, on John F. Kennedy's birthday, I use his quote. Some people look at things the way they are and say, why? And others look at it and say, why not? So let's talk about the why not. Crispus Attucks was the first person to die in the Revolutionary War in Boston. He was an African American. He fought for this country and paid the price with his life. The Buffalo Soldiers were great warriors in the Civil War that fought for their freedom and the freedoms of their families. In World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen never lost a bomber pilot. My mentor, Ray Haysburg, who taught me, who owned Park Sausage, the first African-American company on the stock market, until he passed away in 2010, taught me from 21. He said, Lance, we were so good because they wouldn't let us fight, and we trained 3 times as much as the other pilots. They fought valiantly for this country, even in the middle of Jim Crow. So in World War II, in the Civil War, in the first war this country fought, we have fought valiantly for this country. So in this cyber war that we fight right now, they've spent more money in the cyber war than World War I and II combined. So I say look towards the cities. Look towards our folks to help defend this country in economics, and hopefully protectionism can outweigh structural racism. Because what we look at, I own a company called Digital Systems. We own the only certification center for cybersecurity in the city of DC, 1 out of 2 in Baltimore, and the only one in New Orleans. Why is a small not-for-profit that generates on average $193,000 to $250,000 a year the only cybersecurity for A+, Ethical Hacker, and Network Plus in the entire city of DC? The infrastructure is not in place for us to go in IT. You hear STEM, 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 code, code, code. That's in the hype cycle. You got to know calculus and discrete math to do coding. You being sold a dream. You got to start first with knowing what a computer is and how to fix that. That's called A+. Then you got to know how to network them computers, and then you got to know how to secure them, and then Ethical Hacker 1 and 2. And them salaries start at $15 to $25 an hour, then $63,000 a year, then $80,000 a year, and Ethical Hackers $125,000 a year. And then you ask me, does it really work, Lance? Is that something that we can really do? Well, I had a homeless young lady named Destiny Thompson who was in Rose Street Shelter 2.5 years ago with 2 children. Now, Destiny Thomas is working at the Department of Defense at 21 years old, making $75,000 a year. And the 2 twins, so I done broke the mic. And the 2 twins that was in that shelter with them was a student that I taught in 9th grade, and I always tell my students the first day, I love you if nobody told you today, and if you ever need me, forget this program, you call Mr. Lucas. So one of my students 4 years later in their homeless shelter called Mr. Lucas, and I said, you better get in this A+ program. I'm gonna turn you into a computer tech. Now them same young brothers have taught over 1,000 students apiece. Each one teach one. So we set up the testing centers, we set up the training, we look to employers, and here's the proposition for you employers and you corporate America guys, because we like numbers, right? $60,000 a year of social services for the women. $60,000 to $100,000 to incarcerate us. If you can spend $10,000 and train this person up to $60,000 to $100,000 a year, they will return $20,000 to $40,000 back to the system in the same year with a residual income. 10 people will be $1.3 million in 1 year. 10 people. So, what did I do when the riots happened? I went in and dropped 143 computers in the Urban League. I went and dropped 20 computers at the NAACP. I went and I said, you know what, we got to do something different. And I went and asked the White House folks, I said, let's do a White House Tech Hire initiative here in Baltimore and pull everybody together from Goodwill to the Urban League and the people that normally don't work together. Let's work together. Let's put the pride down and let's do some long-term solutions, because you can march and we can talk, right? But with 25% unemployment, that's equal to the Great Depression for 40 years in most of these neighborhoods, and the Great Depression was only 2 years. These people are living, we are living in a living hell, and we still here. So I'm gonna end on that note, but that's what I did when that uprising happening, and my ask is this. If you have a building, look, I done donated 4,000 computers and closed the digital divide for over 50,000 people, and you never heard my name. So I say to you today, if you got an open building in your city, in your state, we can get unlimited computers. I got to deal with the federal government. I'm gonna wink my eye. And we can make sure that we can put some computers in there and we can do workforce development, okay? And I'm a not-for-profit, so you already know what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Once again, thank this panel for Baltimore.
Rodney Foxworth, Damian Cooper. Come on, give it up one more time. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.